Good evening. Thank you so much for coming out in the cold. We'll try to keep you warm with one another. Tonight we have John Rizzo with us. I think he probably needs no introduction. He's actually been to the center several times over the past however many years. He was acting general counsel of the CIA from 2001 to 2009. He has now written a book, Company Man, which is getting a lot of attention for reasons that I probably don't have to tell you about. But he was in the CIA for 34 years and handled all of those events that make so many of us wonder what goes on behind our backs in the government, from Iran-Contra to many of the Bush policies. And so today, we'll see how much we can talk about. I'm going to leave a lot of room for you guys to ask your questions, because there's only so many I can ask, and I'm going to do my best. So I wanted to start by asking you a question actually about the Central Intelligence Agency. When you read history books or memoirs about 9/11, virtually the one-liner on why did 9/11 happen, what was the problem, was that it was an intelligence failure. So, and in terms of the intelligence community then, I think that what most people hear is, it was the CIA's failure. It doesn't, and so I'm curious if that is a perception that is shared inside the agency, that 9/11 really was a way that the CIA dropped the ball.
Well, I mean, it was, can you hear me? It was an intelligence failure. It was a CIA failure, and everyone inside CIA knew that. Trying the sense of shame and regret. But I must say, in all fairness, it wasn't exclusively a CIA intelligence failure. I mean, it was FBI intelligence failure. It was, some respects, a Department of Transportation intelligence failure in terms of the laying those guys on the planes with what they had. But no, sure, the CIA bore a huge sense of guilt and responsibility about that.
And do you think in some ways that affected how the agency reacted to what it did otherwise, or do you think not?
No, I think it did. I mean, most of us remember, get the crowd here, most of us were adults in the aftermath of 9/11, especially in the city. And, remember all in the postmortems, postmortems, the fact that CIA had been risk averse, had not been sufficiently aggressive, imaginative in rooting out, connecting the dots, another phrase that entered the lexicon, about not somehow uncovering and deterring this catastrophic event. So sure, that bore on us. It certainly bore on me.
Another 9/11 question, and then we can move on to the book specifically, and that is that, after 9/11, there was a pervasive sense, Richard Clarke writes about it, everybody who's written on 9/11 writes about it, that there was a pervasive sense from that moment that there was going to be a follow-on attack. And then at some point, instead of a follow-on attack, there was going to be another attack. So I'm wondering why that was such a widely shared perception.
Well, I mean, there were classified intelligence warnings coming in. After 9/11, it was just an absolute full-bore, APB on anything and everything in terms of threats and homeland. Some of them turned out to be bogus. Many of them probably turned out to be bogus, but they were proliferating. And the sense was, frankly, that this had happened once, and maybe there's one of these, there's a shard that's going to happen again. And of course, in the interim, there were the anthrax attacks. There was a shoe bomber. It just contributed to a mood of imminent, inevitable threat.
And how long would you say that lasted?
Well, I think the national mood and the certainly political pendulum probably started swinging in early 2004, somewhere in there.
So it was for really those first 2 years where there was this
Well, I
sense-
think so. I mean, I was
Okay.
on the inside, so but that was the sense I got.
I meant on the inside.
Yeah.
That's-
Yeah. Well, I certainly, and we certainly felt the winds shifting. Now the threats and the threat information continue to come in all that time, but I'm just saying the sense of momentum, the sense of having the mandate to do whatever it took to prevent another attack slowly evolved into as the interrogation program, other things started to leak out. Went from that from Congress and the public and the media, wait a minute, what the hell are you guys been actually up to now? So I would put that around the beginning, mid of 2004.
So you brought up the interrogation program. So of course I have to read from your book, and then I'll ask you a couple questions. So just bear with me. In March of 2002, Abu Zubaydah is picked up and brought into U.S. custody. Abu Zubaydah is somebody that the United States government thought had actionable intelligence that would have to do with a follow-on attack or another attack. He was thought to be very well tied to the top levels of Al-Qaeda, and he was brought into CIA custody. And the CIA brought to Mr. Rizzo the idea of using enhanced interrogation techniques, which some of us have called torture, including myself. So John Rizzo is the lawyer that has to face them when they come to him and say, can we use these techniques? Would this be okay? We need to talk to this man. We need to get what we need to get out of him, and we need to do it in a timely fashion. We don't want to wait a year or two. And it's interesting how you write about this, and I just wanted to read two things and ask you a question. One is, you say, during my previous 25 years as an agency lawyer, I had never heard of anything remotely like this. Evidently aware of the distinct possibility that what they were proposing would scare the hell out of me, the CTC, CIA people that came to him, contingent, prefaced their presentation with a number of assurances. And then you write, my first reaction was to tell them, at a minimum, to forget waterboarding. It just seemed so frightening, like a plot line out of Edgar Allan Poe. Besides, I had been around the CIA long enough, had been through enough of its misadventures and controversies to develop a gut instinct about what could get the agency and its people into trouble down the road. What's interesting to me about these two passages is and the question I want to ask you about it, is what bothered you, and it's unclear in the text, that it was going to bring trouble down the road, or that it was wrong, and that you didn't know how to handle that?
Well, I mean, I'm trying to be honest here.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I had never, I was gobsmacked with this one afternoon. I had never, mercifully, I'd never had to become conversant with the torture statute. I mean, I was the chief lawyer at the time, so my first thought was, is this stuff across the legal line to torture? I didn't know. As I said in the book, it sounded terrifying. But in terms of morality, I know what you're asking, whether I thought this is repulsive, this is going to put a stain on the government, this is not what America is all about. Honestly, that was not my first thought. My first thought, is this legal? And my second thought was, and maybe this was because I was, inculcated with the agency for so long, is hearing this and saying, this is going to, if we do this, this is going to come back and haunt us forever.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm trying to be as honest as I can here.
I got
The
it.
morality question was not uppermost in my mind.
Did it ever become up?
Well, I've thought about I've thought about it considerably as the time has gone on. Even when I was still at the agency in my last few years, when all of the controversy, the opprobrium arose. Sure, I gave that some thought about the morality.
So what you do because you aren't familiar with the torture statute, is you decide, along with some others, to approach the Department of Justice. And actually, I want to say something here. You write in your book continually about the Department of Justice, as opposed to what everybody else who has written about this has done, which has talked about the Office of Legal Counsel. So, I think it's important that you point out that the Office of Legal Counsel that you went to, that you asked for this ruling on, was in what we call the Department of Justice. And somehow it's always seemed to me like a particularly unhappy fact that they were the ones that wrote these memos. My first question to you is, and this again, I was looking over some of these materials on the way over here in the past week, is we know of two torture memos that were written on August 1st, 2002. One became famous a long time ago, right after the Abu Ghraib scandal. It was addressed to Al Gonzalez at the White House, the legal counsel at the White House, and it basically set out the legal parameters for the enhanced interrogation program and opined on the torture statute. The second one that day was addressed to you. You, not you. And it was,
You from
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it is a, as you say, particularly disturbing graphic memo about different torture techniques that can be used. And some of them seem rather inconsequential, and some of them, but it also includes waterboarding. And so I thought I would read some of them so you get the sense of the breadth of this. Attention grasp, walling, facial hold, facial slap, cramped confinement, wall standing, stress positions, sleep deprivation, insects in a box. You're confined in the box with insects, and then waterboarding, which seems to me of a whole other ilk than all of these other things, but anyway, waterboarding. And you respond quite strongly to the waterboarding, as in the passage I just read. I have a question that I've always wanted to ask. Did you think when you went to OLC that they were going to say yes? That they were going to approve these?
I thought they would approve some of them. The more, say, innocuous. I mean, it's all relative.
No, but sure.
I honestly didn't know if they were going to approve waterboarding. I didn't. I didn't know. I mean, that was the one I thought personally that if there was whatever, if it was going to cross a legal line, that was going to be the one.
And the other one that nobody ever heard about, that we're not allowed to talk about.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So, but if they had written back and said, you know what, you can do the facial hold and the facial slap, and you can't do anything else, there would have been no program. Is that correct?
Well, I think at that point, I think the feeling was that this was a mosaic of techniques that if waterboarding, which was sort of sine qua non in terms of aggressiveness, was not included, or if sleep deprivation was not included, then the rest of them would have been feckless. I mean, it would have been attention grasp, and for guys like Abu Zubaydah and Layas KSM, I don't think the program would have proceeded unless most of the menus, so to speak, had been approved. Now you mentioned how graphic and disturbing and chilling the memos to me were. That was by design. I mean, I urged the Department of Justice. I mean, we gave them as much, and I thought this was important, just lay it out in as much clinical, chilling detail as possible, so there wouldn't be any question later on that that they didn't know what they were approving. And I said, I also, whatever you write back to me, if you approve any of these things, I want you to describe back to us exactly what you're approving. So that's how they came to be so graphic.
In one of the memos, it talks about not using these methods repeatedly. That would, in other words, the torture line, it was one thing to do one of these things, but another thing to repeat it. But then we find out, that waterboarding was done 83 times to one
Zubaydah.
To Zubaydah, and 186 times to Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. So, and the reason I bring this up is that there's a narrative that that everything that was done was checked with the Office of Legal Counsel and against that memo. So How should I think about that?
Well, I mean, there was more waterboarding than I certainly would have anticipated for those two guys. I mean, waterboarding was only done on a grand total of 3 people,
Right.
so but 2 of them, it was extensive. Now,
Right.
it wasn't, sometimes it gets lost in the mix. Again, I'm not trying to trivialize or downplay what was done. These were brutal techniques, but 183 times meant 183 applications of the waterboard, not 183 sessions.
But it is repetitive.
It is repetitive. Now, the memos allowed for some repetitiveness, but honestly, the original memos did not. I mean, they did not countenance, because I didn't countenance that
Right.
it would take that many. And that many were done. And once we learned that that many had been done, we went back to the Department of Justice, reported it, and basically said, this is what happened. This is how it happened. This is beyond what you originally proposed or approved. Is this all right? And they, OLC, basically endorsed. By this time, John, you and Jay Bobby had left. It was Jack Goldsmith there, and they said these number of applications was still within the legally permissible area. But I won't gainsay the fact that, I mean, honestly, it was more waterboarding than in 2002 I would have anticipated was going to be done on any one individual.
Okay. So there were only 2 August 1st memos. There was one to the White House and the one to you. There wasn't another one to you.
No, that was plenty. That was enough. Yeah.
And did you see them both at the same time?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my next question is, how did you, one of them, the one that is addressed to you, is very operational. It's not, it really talks specifically, you're allowed to use your hand this way, open-fisted, closed-fisted, that kind of graphic detail. The other one tries to set out the legal parameters of what exactly constitutes torture. And the famous quote, that it has to be, organ failure, death, or impairment of a, of some physical organ, whatever.
Right.
Is that understood as the legal parameter? Was that understood as legal parameter of torture? And I guess what I am trying to ask you is, what does that mean exactly? Like, what was off the table in terms of what was no longer allowable? Was it, because it reads, when you read it, like it's death.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very, very aggressive, at the minimum, very aggressive, expansive meaning of the torture statute. That whole episode remains a puzzlement to me, because both memos were issued on the same day. One was the top secret memo to me with all the techniques laid out. The second was this almost bone dry legal analysis to Gonzalez. They're both generated by my original request to OLC for guidance. I never understood why they divided what I had asked for into two responses. One, the one to me, one, the legal analysis. The memo to me, I mean, it's all out now, so you can compare them. The memo to me had none of that legal analysis in it. I don't know why they did that. And honestly, maybe because believe me, I was asked about this extensively at my confirmation hearing in 2007, because that Gonzalez memo had been repudiated and declassified. The memo of me was still classified. So, and Karen, to tell you the truth, I was mostly focused on the memo, the top secret memo to me, because that had all the techniques in. That's what I wanted to see in detail. That was a clear guidance, I thought. I read the Gonzalez memo. My reaction was, boy, this is a very enthusiastic interpretation of the torture statute. But I mean, I knew that the techniques, as brutal as some of them were, never approached the limits that John Hewitt had basically set in that memo. So it was really secondary to me. I mean, what I was grasping on was the operational legal memo to me. But I don't know why Justice decided to do what it did.
It's interesting, though, because the CIA and the national security establishment, many people in it, have said, including people at the Department of Justice, have said that the interrogation program was effective, by which they mean it prevented another attack. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was effective. I mean, it went on for what, 6 years? In one way or the other, it was slimmed down over time. But you know, I would sit at the daily 5 o'clock meetings in the CIA Directors Conference Room where all the terrorism experts gathered to go over the day's events, the day's intelligence. And these are career people, and they were convinced that the program was yielding valuable, otherwise unavailable intelligence about Al Qaeda, about threats to the homeland, and they were stoic about that. And it continued. These were people who were not, political appointees. I knew them. I'd known them for years, and they were. I mean, they weren't gloating, but they were convinced it was yielding valuable intelligence. Now, mind you, all at the same time as a political. This is like from 2002 up to 2008, really. Political pendulum had swung heavily. We're all coming under the agency, and everyone coming under increasing political attack. And yet, these people remained consistent that this was yielding results. Now, was it indispensable? Would it had this? I've been asked this many times. Had we never gone down this road, as a strictly practical matter, could the same results from detainees been obtained without these kinds of, extraordinary methods? Perhaps. I mean, I think that's unknowable. But to me, the critical thing to keep in mind was the context of the times. I mean, how long would that have taken to get KSM to yield intelligence on a question and answer basis at a time when we didn't think we had the time?
So that leads me to another question and this is less to do with you than just thinking with you and your role, but just thinking about it. If you know that you have torture as one of the tools in your arsenal and that you think that can get you intelligence that can work and can prevent another attack, do you think that it minimizes or makes people not do the homework they're supposed to do to try to figure out, without torture, without getting to the ticking time bomb scenario, to figure out how to do intelligence in a way that is more along the lines of how one might think of intelligence, which is infiltrating networks, signals intelligence, human intelligence, et cetera. And the reason I bring this up was the question I began with, was 9/11 an intelligence failure. And so if what we most needed as a country was a better intelligence system, do you think it's possible that the interrogation, enhanced interrogation techniques and thinking they worked could have hurt on the other end, or they're just two separate things and they're not related?
No, I mean, I take your point. I mean, you asked if it's possible. Yeah, it's possible. I mean,
Anybody ever bring that up at the agency? Anybody ever say something like that?
Like what?
Like maybe we should be really thinking about how to not have this as an option, because we need to put all of our efforts and everything we're doing into front-ending this.
Honestly, no. I mean, no one at the agency and no one in the rest of the national security community who are privy to the program. I mean, honestly, there have been people.
Interesting.
A couple, some people who are involved in the program or knowledge about the program have come forward the last year or so to say that they always were against it, and they always thought it was torture. I mean, to tell you the truth, I heard none of that from. I mean, not from the Department of Justice, not from inside CIA, not from the White House. So the reality is, no. And maybe we should have, but I was living with this thing for years. I never heard that kind of sentiment.
What about the? I'm just kind of. One room you'd like to be in, or the room to hear that discussion. What about the international reaction? I mean, there's been a lot of blowback, in terms of international reaction. Where is the moral leader? We were supposed to have the United States, et cetera, et cetera. Did anybody bring that up, or was it seem like that was beside the point because?
No, I mean, in fairness, it was. As time went on, I mean, the State Department, the legal advisor of the State Department, is a longtime friend, a guy I respect greatly, named John Bellinger. John had been.
He's speaking here next month.
Oh, okay. Well, he's a great guy, and he was NSC legal advisor at 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
He was, very close to Condi Rice. He and Secretary Rice, I will say by around 2005, 2006, we're starting to express inside the councils of, in NSC meetings and other meetings in the Situation Room that this is really taking a toll on America's image around the world.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, they spoke up in those ways.
And did it have any impact on policy?
Well, the program was cut down dramatically in 2006. I mean, waterboarding was gone. Sleep deprivation technique was lessened considerably from the original approved
Mm-hmm.
durations. So yeah, it did have an impact on policy, but of course the world reaction continued.
Have you read the Senate Select Intelligence Committee report on torture? Are you allowed to read that?
No, I'm gone. I mean, I've been
So
gone
you
for
haven't
5
read it?
years. I have not seen it. All I know about is what you've heard about it. I've been asked about whether it should be released. Now I have the benefit of ignorance. I don't know what's in it, but I think it should be. I mean, I don't know what it says. Apparently, it concludes that the program was worthless.
That's what the rumor is.
And there was also apparently a fairly rigorous CIA rebuttal.
Have you seen that?
I haven't seen anything, Karen.
Oh,
I mean,
just asking.
when I left, I left. I mean, I just sayonara. I'm out of it now. But I think all of these things should be released. I mean, redacted for classified information. But I mean, what they say the Senate report. I mean, it took them 4 years.
It's 6,000 pages.
6,000 pages, 6 million bucks, 50,000 footnotes. I mean,
that's okay.
I mean, it's taxpayer money. Let's see it. I mean, I don't know what's in it. I know that they never interviewed anyone who was involved in the program. I would have been happy to talk to them for one thing.
They never interviewed you.
They never interviewed anyone. I mean, apparently they just
Read the documents.
All the millions of documents. But sure, I think it should be out. And if Washington, one thing I learned about Washington, if it doesn't get released, someone's going to leak it anyway. So let's get it out.
A couple more questions, and then I'm going to open it up to the rest of you. One of the things that struck me in reading this book, because it is it's not your normal book. We have memoirs of people who have been in office. We have defensive treatises of people who have been in office. We have, apologies of people that have, confessions. And so I was kind of curious who you thought you were writing this for. Was it for the people who criticized the CIA and the interrogation programs and other things that's come up in the book? Was it for the general public so they would have an insight into what goes on inside the CIA and its challenges? Or who were you thinking?
Well, I mean, I was trying to write for a broader audience, honestly, rather than, I mean, I sort of was hoping the lawyers might be interested in what it's like to have been a lawyer in the national security community for so long, since my career from the mid-'70s to end of 2009 really did span the modern evolution of CIA. So I thought that might be interesting, but I was determined not to make it a legal text. I mean, when it gets right down to it, it's a bunch of stories. I mean, the 9/11 thing, the whole 9/11 business I knew was what, honestly, I wouldn't have gotten a book deal, not for that. But I had spent 25 years at CIA before that, so I was trying to convey through stories in a way that was accessible to lawyers and non-lawyers, what it was like to be inside CIA during all those years, and what it was like to start as a young guy with no inside knowledge, or basically a leap of faith joining CIA, and coming out the other end of the tunnel all those years later as a controversial, divisive figure. Well,
let's talk a little bit about the CIA. Just my last question in this part anyway, unless no one has any questions, in which case I'll keep going. One of the points that you make is that the CIA is a very unusual agency beholden to the president, basically responding to the president, and that's it, actually. And that under the commander-in-chief powers, there can be a lot decided between the president and the CIA. But what's happened since 9/11 is the proliferation of intelligence agencies. Everybody's an intelligence agency now. Jim Comey, the new director of the FBI, in his confirmation hearings referred repeatedly to the FBI as an intelligence agency. Treasury sees itself as a financial intelligence agency. A lot of other agencies that I won't mention also see themselves as intelligence agencies. So my question to you is, just from your mind, and this is separate from what we've been talking about, is the CIA now one among many? Is it still have the uniqueness and distinction that it had? And I'm just curious, from inside the CIA, what it actually feels like to have had the entire government say, you know what, we're going to do intelligence too because we need to do this because this is what it's all about, and how that refracts inside the CIA.
Yeah, I mean, CIA, for all its reputation, mystique, is at bottom, a bureaucracy, and a bureaucracy battle in Washington, as you know, Karen, battles with other bureaucracies. Mm-hmm. So, sure, there have been turf struggles over the years, even since 9/11, what was supposed to be a kumbaya moment where everyone comes together and reduces the stovepipes, mm-hmm. all of that. Well, what led to the major, there were two major organizational changes since 9/11 mandated by Congress. One, of course, is creating, and I never quite understood the rationale for this, in order to avoid stovepiping, to create yet a huge new bureaucracy to sit over all the existing intelligence bureaucracies. I'm talking about the Office of National Intelligence. And then there was the creation in 2003 of the Department of Homeland Security. So, I mean, I thought that was rather ironic. I mean, the idea was supposed to be to make things less complicated, and it's made them more complicated. So sure, a lot of that happens, but I mean, I will tell you, the CIA, in my view, will still be the biggest dog on the block. No other agency in my career has been tasked by the president to conduct a covert action program. Now, technically, as a matter of law, the president could authorize DOD or FBI to do a covert action program. That has never happened. Presidential findings, I mean, I get into this in the book, presidential findings are an art form. No other agency but CIA has ever been, in my 36 years, was ever tasked to do covert action. No other agency, I think, for a variety of reasons, is capable of doing a covert action. And covert action is what presidents, regardless of parties, have always gravitated to. So I think that will always make CIA the premier inter faces of the intelligence agencies.
Okay, time for your questions.
As I indicated, I don't know what's in that Senate report, so I haven't seen it, and I didn't mean, if I gave you the impression I'm dismissing it out of hand, I'm not, because I haven't seen it. That's why I would like to see it released.
But it's contradictory, clearly.
Well, that's what I read in the paper. I mean, so apparently it is, but I'd like to read it. Ali Soufan, I've never met Mr. Soufan, but I don't doubt his bona fides. I don't doubt that he sincerely believes that the techniques were not necessary. I mean, all I can tell you is that at the time, the FBI headquarters, Director Mueller, I remember this, distinctly. He said that the FBI was not going to participate any further in the interrogation because these techniques were going to be used, and that's not what FBI does. I never heard, and I think I would have heard, had there been an FBI sentiment that what they were doing was yielding results and that techniques weren't necessary. I don't gainsay that may have been true, but I never heard that at the time. He's by all accounts, a seasoned FBI interrogator. And maybe it would have worked, as I indicated, but the question was time. How long would it have taken for Zubaydah and KSM? We'll never know. And I'm not saying it wouldn't have worked. Okay, now there was one other thing that you said, the Panetta report. honestly, I don't know what that is. I mean, again, whatever it is, it should come out. Maybe, maybe after all is out, I will feel differently, Bert. But as of now, it's just the way I feel.
You can be sure that when these reports do come out, the first person they're going to go to is you. So get ready.
Yeah,
Totally.
yeah. Now look, this program's been over 5 years. It's gonna,
Totally.
it's gonna be with us forever. So why not?
I don't have a good question, but I'll try one. After 9/11, I had the privilege of being sent to Iraq as an Army Reserve lawyer, and then recently to Afghanistan. I came back from both those places more cynical and more liberal than when I went. As to your comment about asking people about this, I don't think the military lawyers we taught and trained and the top TJAGs, the top JAGs were all opposed to the torture. I mean, the idea, the skin is a organ system. The idea that you can pull out fingernails and not have it be torture is absolutely absurd. But my question to you is at your level of government, the level of government you were in, which is so high, I'm just wondering, do people consider and are they trained about things like human nature, the human nature that caused the hatred that caused 9/11, and then the various factors thereafter? Because I see the people over here with the prosecute you and all and whatnot, but I'm wondering where in our government are people actually thinking about the motivations that cause violence and how to protect our national interests by identifying why people hate us and to avoid the hatred rather than getting in only in the weeds and not looking at the human motivations and what will get people to get along and not hate the United States so that we can avoid having 9/11s rather than just talking about how we can pull out fingernails to get unactionable intelligence.
I mean, first of all, just a minor factual point. The interrogation program, the techniques did not include pulling out fingernails. I mean, it was, but I know that was metaphorical when you meant a broader point. I think, yeah, you're right. CIA, is an intelligence collection, an analytical agency. Maybe it should do more than it has historically about dealing with motivations, dealing with why people, trying to assess and deter people from doing bad things before they do them, assessing behaviors and viewpoints towards the U.S. Yeah, maybe CIA, that's a mission CIA should have emphasized more. I mean, honestly, it was never, my entire career, that was never a focus of CIA's attention. Maybe it should be. What we're talking about here, though, was, CIA is also, an action arm, an action agency, covert action agency. And that's why it was given the lead in the days after 9/11 to undertake a series of unprecedented, extraordinary measures to prevent the recurrence of an extraordinary, unprecedented attack on the homeland. So, that's what we were focused on those early years, preventing another attack. Well, no, that's correct. We had no experienced interrogators. As I said in the book, we had never, in my previous 25 years, held anyone against their will, and certainly not incommunicado. So, no, we did not have any enhanced interrogators. Did we, experienced interrogators, I should say, did we explore non-coercive techniques that might have worked? Is that the question? I mean, is that what you're asking? Other alternative means besides these extreme measures? Is that what you're asking?
The effectiveness of interrogation techniques.
Well, there was some of that, but to be honest with you, probably it was not an exhaustive review because, again, time was deemed to be of the essence. That we had this guy that he seemed to be holding out, that if there was going to be another attack, this guy knew about it, and so we had to proceed on a fast track, and these measures, I will tell you, they are counterterrorism people came up with them in relatively relatively short amount of time. I'm talking, 3-4 weeks, something like that. That's true.
Who has a question? Go ahead. Make sure it's a question.
Thank you. I want to ask if you personally witnessed any of the tortures that you had a legal involvement with. And secondly, have you ever personally viewed the effects of drone strikes or reviewed videotapes of those drone strikes? And finally, would you agree that videotapes of all of the tortures that have been conducted and all of the drone strikes should be released to the general public?
No, I never witnessed the imposition of these techniques as they were happening. Yes, I did witness drone strikes as they were happening. And the third one is what? What was the third question?
Do you think the videos of drone strikes should be kept in secret?
Well, I'm an openness guy now. I'm out. I mean, I think, I will tell you. I mean, I'm glad you asked that question because I couldn't help but notice your sign. And, one of the points I make in the book, and I don't, again, I'm just not, I really don't want to trivialize this, but, the drone program, sir, started in 2002, the same time as the interrogation program started. Now, the interrogation program, as we all know, became increasingly controversial, increasingly contentious. A program of admittedly brutal interrogations. At the same time, this drone program was picking up a pace, and people were getting killed, they were getting blown to bits for all the world to see. Sometimes innocent civilians were being hit. Now, until only the last year or two, I mean, I don't mean you personally, but human rights groups, ACLU, other groups, all of that time, the drone program, do you remember any congressional opprobrium? Do you remember any lawsuits? Do you remember anything? All that time, the interrogation program was ongoing. Now, this is a personal moral judgment, but on the one hand, we had a brutal, sometimes brutal interrogation program to aggressively interrogate terrorists. Coterminously with that, we had a U.S. government authorized program to kill terrorists on the ground, clinically, but decisively. And yet there seemed to be certainly not the same set, and I was experiencing it on the inside and wondering about it at the time. There seemed to be more tolerance, more that the moral and legal justification for killing was more substantial than a program for aggressively and brutally interrogating someone. I mean, I always found that dissonant.
Hi, Mr. Rizzo. My name is Janice Karpinski. I was in Iraq in 2003 and 2004. I was the general who was in charge of Abu Ghraib, one of 21 facilities we ran. And I have probably 1,000 questions on that side of it, including how Washington or you or people that knew allowed, especially those 7 soldiers, to shoulder the blame for the rest of the world, to blame somebody. But before all of that, I'd like to know how in the world the CIA was unprepared for 9/11. They have, I mean, DOD at least has war plans for even the invasion from outer space. Innocuous war plans that are sitting on the shelves and are allegedly updated every year or so. How was the CIA or Washington or our government so unprepared for a response to 9/11? That would have stopped everything else. All of this stuff. That's what I'd like to know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, John Karpinski, I did recognize you, and thank you for your service. I don't think we've ever met, but, well, I don't know it was a massive massive, unforgivable intelligence failure. How it happened, there've been the 9/11 Commission did that, exhaustive report, and there were lapses all along the way. I mean, it was CIA. It was a huge CIA lapse. I mean, signals were missed. Leads weren't followed up. In fairness, it wasn't just CIA, FBI. I mean, it was a collective, massive failure. And how did that happen? I don't know. I was on the inside at the time. I honestly thought that, in the 1999, 2000, early 2001 period, CIA was actively tracking all of this stuff and would find out. I mean, so it was just, it's hard to describe it was a shock.
As you said, the CIA is the agency for covert operations.
Correct.
I probably would debate whether DOD and the FBI are doing the same things now, maybe not as well in your opinion, but if their specialty was covert operations, the results of those covert operations would have answered the question about human rights, effective interrogation techniques, preventing the need for interrogation techniques, because they would have been gathering all the information that they have been claiming to have gathered all of these years.
I don't disagree. I mean, look, in many respects, the fact that the CIA did this program, I mean, Lord knows it's come back to haunt the agency forever. It's haunted all of us who played a role in it. So in many ways, I wish it had never happened. It would never have been necessary. But I mean, we have to.
We get nothing from the waterboarding or those techniques. We get basically nothing from the drone reports. There has to be a way to stop it. And I know you're out of the agency now, but somebody in Washington has to be able to flip the switch.
I'm just curious. Stop what? Stop drones?
All of this, anything that fits into that category of necessary evils or whatever.
How about we leave it at this, that you both agree that, with me, that 9/11 really was, you used the word unforgivable. It's just something that the country doesn't talk about. We're all supposed to accept that it was like a hurricane. It wasn't a natural disaster. And it's rarely said, so thank you for saying that. What is your opinion about the Snowden revelations? But in this room, we don't talk about assassinations. So
No. Look, in brief, this debate that's been going on about privacy and invasion of privacy of Americans' metadata, there's no question that would not have occurred without the Snowden reservation. I mean, just no way. I just know NSA. I know they would not have unilaterally started this discussion. So that's I guess a plus. I mean, where it come down on this stuff. First of all, I had no idea. I mean, this is stuff that he has got access to, and it's disclosed. What I read and it's stuff I never had access to. The notion that a 29-year-old contractor in some outpost in Hawaii could get access to that volume is astonishing to me. I don't think he's a hero. I don't think he should be granted clemency. I think he should come back, face justice. Maybe he'll get off. If he does, that's fine. But I mean, he is no hero in my mind. Well, that's an easy one. I'm delighted to be here. I'm privileged to be invited. I'm honored to come. I assume I wouldn't have been invited were not the president or the leadership of the university on board. I like to talk to audiences about the book. I'm flattered when people come, even if they disagree with things I've done. So I enjoy these experiences. So torture is not a gray area. Never was. Not to me. I I mean, I know this is, people vehemently disagree with this, but to this day, I don't think that what the agency did in those days amounted to torture. I didn't believe it then, because if it did, it would have been illegal, and we would not have done it.
Hello, Mr. Rizzo. I just want to thank you for your service. John Yoo is a very good friend of mine, and I think he's a true patriot, and what he did to protect this country is beyond approach. Question I want to ask, you spoke about 9/11, but you forgot to mention that 9/11, because of political correctness, happened, and not only because of that, but because of the Democrats in Congress. In addition, a question I want to ask is about Osama bin Laden, who was hiding in Pakistan, and we gave this country a lot of money, and we support them. Basically, they exist because of the American support, militarily and financial.
I mean, I think a lot of people just don't understand how that was and how it was that an alleged ally of sorts was hiding him, and just, I think that's
Yeah, well, again, I was, when this Abbottabad operation went down, I've been gone for close to a year, more than a year. But I mean, during all my time on the inside, you know, the agency was closest of all U.S. government. They were the pointy head of the spear with the government of Pakistan. And I can tell you, the agency never trusted the government of Pakistan, the ISI. And there were, and ISI, there were some, you know, loyal and dedicated pro-American people, plus there was huge pockets of ISI that were sympathetic and not collaborating with Al-Qaeda. So how the CIA did not know about bin Laden being there unilaterally, again, I find that a puzzlement. I mean, he always employed very good operational security, but still, I mean, it was startling to me. How Pakistan did not tell CIA about that location where he'd been for years is astonishing, but not surprising to me.
This is not a question. This is a concluding statement. One of the most disturbing aspects of the era of torture and et cetera has been the lack of accountability. And one of the problems with the lack of accountability is that people like the people in this room feel the need for answers that they can't otherwise get. And I think it's a very profound fact that you, of all the people in the Bush administration who will not answer these questions, who will not come to these events, who are afraid to talk in public, is at least some opening into a kind of, for me, what accountability is trying to understand precisely what happened. So I want to thank you very much for coming, and I want to thank the audience for being who you are. And we will see you next time. Thank you.